Hello and welcome to the Wolfson Economics Prize webinar for applicants. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Jennifer Powers and I'll be your host here today. The prize is endowed by Lord Wolfson and seeks to answer the following question. If member states leave the Economic and Monetary Union, what is the best way for the economic process to be managed to provide the soundest foundation for future growth and prosperity of the current membership? We have an eminently well-qualified panel of judges overseeing the prize, including Derek Scott, Professor Charles Goodhart, Professor Francesco Giavazzi, Professor Manfred Newman, and Professor Jean-Jacques Rosa. I'm here today with Derek Scott, Chairman of the prize, and Neil O'Brien, Director of Policy Exchange, who is managing the prize. I'm going to ask Neil and Derek to update us, and then we'll throw it open to questions from the audience. So please have your questions ready, and you can put them in via the public chat, and we'll do our best to answer them. Neil, can I start with you? I'll just move the camera around. Could you tell us why Policy Exchange got involved in the prize?
Sure. The question about the breakup of the Economic and Monetary Union is a huge and important problem. That's very obvious. It's not something that we put on the agenda. It's in the newspapers every single day. And it's a huge question that not a huge amount of public work is being done on. Governments around Europe, various banks, are thinking about what would happen if members leave the Economic and Monetary Union, how to manage all that. But for obvious reasons, a lot of those governments don't particularly want to talk about this subject because they're worried that it might happen. But just because something might be desirable or undesirable doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to happen. So we do need to think at this point about what we should be doing if countries like Greece or other member states do end up leaving the euro. And it's an important question which has a lot of different bits, so it's very well suited to a prize competition of the kind that we're running.
Yeah, what is it about prizes? Why do you think a prize is particularly well suited to this issue?
So it's a big kind of multidisciplinary question. So people who have looked at the prize rules and the sub-questions that have been suggested will see that there are kind of big legal questions, for example. So legal questions about what you do if you've got a contract between a country that's left the euro and the countries that are still in it. You know, if I've signed a contract between those two different countries, which currency do things end up getting settled in? If you owe me in euros, but you end up, your currency is now the new drachma or something, how do you end up paying me? And there are big kind of central banking questions. What happens to the national debt of that country if they suddenly leave and their currency is worth a lot less? Do their debts increase? Do they default on part of their debt? All those kind of questions. And there are big political questions really about how you manage the whole process as well. There are historical examples we can draw on. There's nothing quite like the EMU, but there are different currency pegs that you can look through in history, and you can look at the way those ended and how the process was managed. There are probably some lessons we can draw from that. So it's a very multidisciplinary question. It's a big question, and it deserves this big prize really, because it is something which many different people all over the world can contribute to solving. Lots of people have thoughts and parts of the solution to this question, and the prize is really helping to draw all out from all those people all over the world.
Yes, it is a big prize, £250,000. What is it about a prize? Why do you think Lord Wolfson chose a prize rather than commissioning a piece of research from a particular university, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's really what I was just saying. So the idea is, I suppose, that there are lots of people out there who we don't know about, who we've perhaps never heard of, who have got interesting, important stuff to say about this. And the good thing about prize is it's very inclusive, so lots of different people can get involved in it. Okay,
that makes sense. What level of response have we had to the prize thus far?
Okay, so some people have already entered, but I would definitely say to people, it's not too late for them to enter too. It's not too late to get your submissions in before the end of this month. And I'm sure there are people out there who've still got great ideas who should be applying for it.
Okay, Derek, turning to you, let me move the camera around so the audience can see you. That's great. Why did you want to get involved in the Wolfson Economics Prize?
Well, I suppose on one level, because I rather anticipated the problems that have arisen, which it doesn't get you very far. But as Neil said, it's a very important issue, and I think one of the things that is striking is there's still a complete, if not a complete, a significant misunderstanding of how we got into the mess. And if you don't understand how you get into the mess, you probably won't understand how you get out of the mess. And as Neil said, a lot of the discussions are inevitably in secret, and I think this is an opportunity to try and, if not bring about a benign solution, then the least damaging solution to what is a very serious crisis.
Yes. The crisis in the Eurozone seems to have abated somewhat since the latest package of measures was announced before Christmas. Do you think the question the prize addresses is still relevant?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look over the last 18 months, the markets periodically have appeared to get some satisfaction by various packages put together. The additional lending provided by the ECB has provided some relief for the core economies and liquidity, but the fundamental issue is still there, and there's no danger of the prize not being relevant.
There are various aspects to the question at stake, and Neil outlined some of them. Which do you think are the most interesting?
Well, I think they're all pretty interesting. I mean, the whole question of how the economics unravel. I mean, when and if this thing does unravel, it'll be very damaging. In my view, less damaging than the longer it goes on. But there are other issues, as Neil referred to, banking, what happens to debts. There's political questions. So there's the whole series of issues that need to be addressed. And as we've said, that I think entrants need to show some awareness of all the issues, but clearly they don't necessarily want to focus on all of them and can concentrate on one or two which they may feel more important than others.
Okay. The prize rules set out a maximum word count of 25,000 with a suggested minimum of 15,000. Will shorter entries be accepted?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people shouldn't be frightened by 25,000. Certainly anything between 10 and 25,000 is perfectly acceptable, and if people want to write in 10,000, that's fine. I mean, they are required to put in a negative summary of 1,000 words and I think a biography of 100 words. But other than that, they've got quite a lot of flexibility.
Okay. And one last question for you, Derek, before we move on. We've had several people indicate that they would like to enter as a team. What's your view? Is that allowed?
Yeah, it's certainly allowed, and makes a certain amount of sense given there are a lot of issues. All I think we've said is that if there is a team, then one person has to be identified as the person who receives the prize, and how the team deals with it after that. If they happen to win, it's up to them.
Okay. Neil, anything to add about teams? I mean, do you welcome that as an option for people?
No, I'm sure quite a lot of people, I think, are planning to enter as teams. It seems to be quite a common thing, partly because they can bring together people with different kinds of expertise. But yeah, as Derek says, they do just need to name one person who we can correspond with.
Okay, and you mentioned the deadline is the end of the month. Can you just remind people how they make submissions?
Yeah, you send an email if you want to find the details. They're on the Policy Exchange website. But the email address is Wolfson Prize, all one word, at policyexchange.org.uk.
That's right, and they just need to send a PDF and also a Word, Microsoft Word or similar program submission as well. Excellent. Well, let's see if we have any questions. I hope those of you who've joined us will feel like they want to take part. So if you could just send those in to us. And I'll have a look. Yes, I see we have one here. When you talk about prosperity, do you weigh countries equally or by population? Well, that's an interesting one.
Okay, so it's a good question from Anil. Really, we've left the rules of the competition relatively open so that people have got a lot of discretion about how they measure some of these themselves. So how you want to kind of, what your measure of welfare is kind of up to you. Some people will use different measures, some more economic measures, some other kind of welfare measures out there. And you can think about which countries you're interested in yourselves. In the prize, we do talk about in the rules, the welfare of the current members of the euro. It does specify that as being the thing that we're interested in. But beyond that, it's up to you. The basic question that Anil's asked is about how you weigh different member states against each other, and I would say that's really up to you if you want to do that.
And I think you've got to be a bit careful about trying to be too precise and too clever about this. I mean, there's a whole lot of uncertainties about this whole project. So the notion that you can be terribly precise about GDP, wealth per head, all the rest of it, I wouldn't get too bogged down. It's a more generic question, I think, the way we see this is given the problems we're in, how, broadly speaking, do you deal with the countries that are leaving the currency area, and in general terms, how do you configure a position where the existing members can be, broadly speaking, more prosperous than they would otherwise be.
Okay, great. Got another question here. What should be the balance of focus between those countries leaving the Eurozone and those leaving, perhaps meant those staying?
Yeah, I can maybe take that one if you want.
Yeah, great.
So it's good, a good question from Capital Economics there. And I would imagine that a lot of the focus will be on the countries that are leaving the Economic and Monetary Union, because they're probably going to see the most severe effects. I think it's probably important also to look at what happens to any member states who don't leave as well. But I can imagine that a lot of people will put quite a lot of their emphasis on the countries that are leaving, because that's where you expect to see the most kind of severe dislocations. But I would again say we've left it up to people to decide for themselves what kind of Euro breakup they want to kind of model or look at. Some people have talked about just one member state leaving. Some people talk about Greece and the media a lot, obviously. Others have thought that if one country leaves, a number of countries might leave in Southern Europe, or even that you might have stronger currencies, stronger countries rather, leaving the Eurozone, or the whole thing breaking up into two. So we're really leaving it up to people to decide for themselves which member states they foresee leaving the zone.
But I think it's important to recognise that we are talking about how the future prosperity of the current membership is concerned, which includes those that will leave and those that stay in. And clearly, there are obvious implications for countries that leave and how they get out of their difficulties and how they might restore growth, and that in the process has implications for those countries that are left. So Neil is obviously right, but the question does refer to the whole, the present existing membership of the Eurozone, those that leave and those that stay in or remain.
Great. I have an easy question here from Carl. Are open office formats also acceptable in place of Word? Yes, absolutely. We just need a PDF and then also a version that is available to be checked. So that would be absolutely fine. We have another question here from Ruta. Are you mostly interested in
Technicalities?
Or in the principles of new sound money?
I'm not totally sure what you mean, I'm afraid. I mean, we are interested in the technical detail of how to handle all those specific questions that are mentioned in the guide about central banking type questions, international transactions and the like, how to redenominate existing contracts. And those, if that's what you mean by technicalities, those are definitely the kinds of things that we are most interested in, rather than something that's very abstract and doesn't look particularly at the Eurozone in particular.
Okay, I have a question here from Mr. Chowdhury, which I'm just going to turn to now, which was, what do you do with all the essays? Will they be destroyed or will they be kept?
So good question. So the intention is to publish not just the very winning entry, but also potentially a number of runners-up, if there are good runners-up as well. Mm-hmm. So they will be published and get a wide audience. They'll be circulated, in fact, to lots of decision makers, both in the UK and also in Brussels, and so they'll be online. Other entries that don't win, eventually we will obviously delete the files. So we're not just going to hold on to details further.
Okay, we have a question here from Stephen Marchant. Since the financial system is globally connected, shouldn't solution for a member leaving the Eurozone include the wider issue of the G20 and global financial systems and the impact on other countries?
Well, I think it certainly is. It's legitimate and probably important to think about what's happening with the rest of the world and the way those countries interact with the rest of the world as well. But I would caution against getting too far away from the focus of the prize, which is really about the Eurozone. I mean, of course, you have to think about the impact of such a big economic event on other countries outside the Eurozone as well. But I would try and stay focused on the question too.
No, I agree with that. And I think I tend to put it the other way around. If one was looking at the major world international financial and economic crisis, then one very important jigsaw piece of this is the euro crisis itself. So I mean, I think I would, in a sense, turn it the other way around. The extent to which it was possible to come up with a quote-unquote solution to the eurozone crisis would actually ameliorate some of the international conditions. So I think maybe I'd just reinforce what Neil says. I tend to focus on the eurozone rather than trying to go wider.
Yeah, and it's not a prize to try and come up with ways of, for example, reforming the G20 or generally reforming kind of international financial governance. It is specifically to do with the euro area, so people should focus on that.
Okay, we had a follow-up question to that. They're just seeking clarification as to whether all essays will be published or just the winning essays. And I believe it's just the winner plus any that you deem of particular merit.
Exactly. Not all of them will be published.
Right. Okay. We have another question from Jonathan Hill. Are you able to disclose the marking criteria?
So what we've said in the rules about the criteria is that there are a series of sub-questions that people should look at. They're given in the entry pack, which you can find on the Policy Exchange and website. Now, those questions are not exhaustive and they're not exclusive. So it's not the case that you can only think about those questions. You can also think about other things too, if you think they're relevant. Nor is it the case that you have to go into a huge amount of detail on every single one of those questions. So a good entry will probably address most of the sub-questions that we've raised. So the questions that are there in the pack are things that we are looking for answers to, but you don't have to have an exactly equal focus on all of those questions. And it's quite possible an entry will have a lot of merit if it is particularly strong in answering one or two of the sub-questions in good detail.
Okay.
Or come up with others that we haven't thought of.
Oh yeah, indeed, come entirely up with new things.
Right. Okay. I've got a good question here from Mr. Chowdhury again. Would you consider splitting the prize?
There's not been any discussion about splitting the prize. We did say in the entry pack that there is an opportunity that if the judges think that there are other entries of particularly strong merit beyond the one which is considered to be the winner, they may decide to award some runners-up prizes as well. So I think hope that answers the question.
Okay, and then there was also some clarification sought on how important is the legal exit mechanism.
Okay, another good question. And again, I'm not precisely sure what is meant by that. If it's covering the legalities of what happens if a member state leaves the euro and what happens to its contracts and so on, I think that would be very good. It's a Wolfson Economics Prize though. It's not a sort of lawyer's prize. So it is less interested in questions about, is it legal for member states to leave the euro, and it's more interested in kind of de facto questions about assuming that some member states have left the euro, what then happens economically, and that does have a legal dimension, but it is primarily a kind of economics prize.
I think the only point I'd add on that is that clearly there are legal aspects to this in one way or another, and we all know that almost by definition there is no hard and fast answer in advance to what are legal questions. So I think it's perfectly reasonable as entrants address some of these issues. It's not exactly less ambiguous, but there's nonetheless no demand to come up with a certain answer in what will be legal cases, which there will not be. In some instances, be no certain answer, whether it's over contracts or whether who is responsible for debt or what it's denominated in. So there's inevitably a bit of ambiguity in that kind of area.
Okay, thank you for that, Derek. We have another question here referencing today's Financial Times. Apparently there's a series called Capitalism in Crisis. Isn't this really a crisis of human behavior? He asks. Therefore, is the Wolfson Prize actually asking a much bigger and far more dangerous question? I don't know if either of you have views on that.
No, I mean, I wouldn't get too obsessed with the articles in the FT on the future of capitalism. This is a question about the Eurozone crisis, and there may be some more general lessons to be learned, but I wouldn't get to try to broaden it too much. This is not about the future of capitalism or the crisis of capitalism. It's a rather similar one that's been going on since 1867, so I wouldn't get too bogged down on that.
Neil, did you want to add anything on that?
I'm not sure whether, other than just to say, it is restricted to the question on the paper, as it were, rather than a sort of much wider, bigger global type question.
We seem to have had a very brief problem with the quality of the audio. Someone's asked us if we could repeat about the word quantity. I believe the answer to that was that there's a 25,000 word upper limit and a suggestion of a minimum of 15,000 words, but that's not a hard and fast.
Or 10.
Or indeed 10.
Yeah.
And that's not a hard and fast rule. That's simply a guide. So if you have an entry that is less than 15,000 or less than 10,000 words, that would be very welcomed.
Yeah, I can just see one of the questions that's just popped up is from someone saying that they're struggling to get to even 10,000 words. And my suggestion is if you don't feel like you can meet that that kind of lower limit, do still nonetheless, if you're interested in applying, send in your entry. But we are looking for something which is a kind of expert answer to some quite technical questions. But if people feel like they've got serious answers to those kind of questions we've posed, even though the word limit, the number of words they've come up with is shorter, they should still put them in, and we will certainly consider them.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, Lord Wolfson is looking for the best answers to this question. So word count is of secondary importance. I've got a question here that says, can you tell us what the weight of the different sub-questions will have? Neil, that's a really good question.
That's another good question. And they don't have any different weights. They're all, in a sense, equally important. You don't have to cover all of them, as I was saying before. You don't have to address every single one of them in detail. Though I'd expect that a really good answer probably would cover most of them. And you can certainly decide you want to devote a lot more of your effort, a lot more of your writing to particular sub-questions. You might focus particularly, say, on what happens to central bank reserves or something like that, and go into more detail on that than other questions. So there's no kind of weighting scheme, and it's quite possible to come up with a good or winning answer, even if you don't do every single sub-question in lots and lots of detail.
That's a really good point, and I hope that people realise that, because it does mean that people with particular expertise in a certain area still have a contribution to make to the prize.
Right.
How will entries be marked? Will they be marked blind? That's
absolutely. Again, another really important point. So there'll be an initial filter, because we are going to get, I think, quite a lot of entries. There'll be an initial filter down to a shortlist. We think of about 10. And the last 10 shortlisted entries will be judged by the panel of judges completely blind. So there'll be no names on them. The judges won't know where they've come from. So they'll be choosing blind. That's good blind.
Okay, and then a very good question here come in from Sheila Shepherd. Will you withhold the prize money if you feel that no paper has met your desired standard?
Yes.
Gentlemen, straight out of the gates, Derek feels that...
no, we've made that clear, but I mean, I'm sure we will get some good entrants, but we must reserve the right to do that.
And you agree with that, Neil?
No, it does actually say that in the prize rules in the pack that you can get on the Bolton Exchange website. There is it said that we reserve the right not to award something if we didn't feel that anything came up to the required standard.
Okay, and we've had a request for clarification about the word limit again, so let me just deal with that right now. The executive summary, 1,000 words, is that in or outside the 25,000 words limit?
It's
the 1,000
so that's separate. Very good point. So the 1,000 word executive summary that we've asked for those longer entries is not counted as part of your 25,000 words. That's outside the word limit.
Right, and the appendices as well are outside of the 25,000 word maximum.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. That's helpful.
And some people have also asked before about whether graphs, tables, charts, and the like, they're counted as part of the word limit. They're not. They're separate. So unlike in some other prizes, a graph does not count as part of your word limit.
Okay, and Amir has asked, when the best 10 are chosen, will those shortlisted be notified?
Yes, they will.
They will be notified. Okay, that's good to know. And will you be requesting any changes to the winning entry, or will you publish it as is?
Well, I mean, my feeling is that if we've decided on a winning entry, then it may be that, having read it and the panel read it, it might go back and suggest some revisions. But I mean, that seems to be fairly marginal, but it seems to be the interest of the entrant as well, if he or she was prepared to agree with that. But it obviously wouldn't require, you wouldn't award the prize if you were then going back and answering major changes.
Okay, we have a question from David Fairbairn, who asks, will shortlisted papers be put into the public domain, or only at that point, or only when the final winner is announced?
I think our plan is currently that we will only be publishing the winner once it's been announced and the runners-up at that point as well, rather than kind of shortlisting things at an early stage. It's possible that plan will change, but I think the plan is just to publish the winner once we have a winner and some runners-up.
Okay, That makes sense. John St. Hill has asked for some guidance on the style of submissions. Let me just see if I can go back and find that question again. Should we be producing a document ready for publishing, or should we adopt standard academic journal practice of putting the graphs and tables at the end? Is there a preferred referencing style, Harvard, etc.? Do you want to speak to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's completely up to you which style you want to do them in. And the classic academic style, where you have all of your charts at the end, is absolutely fine. If you want to have them in the body of the text for readability, that's fine too. If your entry does win, it is quite possible we'll then go through it and edit for kind of readability, typos and the like. But we can do that at the stage where somebody is won. And we're quite relaxed really about which particular academic style people put their entries in. So either way is no problem really.
Okay, we have a question here that says, hopefully the winning proposal will be put into practice. If the proposal also assists in preserving the EMU, would that be applied as well? Not totally sure what's meant by that question.
Yeah, there's two questions there really. So yes, hopefully the winning proposal will actually affect real world, and the point of this prize is to come up with things which will be of use to policymakers, and that's one reason why we'll make sure that we do circulate the winning entry to all the key decision makers. If you think that your findings are in some way helpful to preserving Eurozone, that's fine. But I would just caution that it is a prize which isn't. It's not the question in the prize is not should member states leave the euro or not. The question is, assuming that some of them do, how do you then manage the process? And if you think that even with your best ideas about how you can minimize disruption and damage from that, it still looks pretty bad to you, and you think that might encourage people not to leave, then that's your call. But it is just to remind people a question about what to do if member states have left the euro. It's not a question about whether they should or not.
Okay, fine. There's a question. What is the main criteria for choosing the winner? I think there might have been an earlier question, again, asking for clarification about criteria in general.
Well, I think it's got to be pretty rigorous analysis. To take the branding the obvious, I think it's got to cover a number of the issues in one way or another that Neil has addressed. It's clearly got to be presented in clear English, and the extent to which it's possible, given the current circumstances, to inject any originality, though I have to say it seems to me most of the original ideas are probably already been used up, would also be the case. Sorry? Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, if the judges were not able to come to a unanimous decision, then there would be a kind of weighting of the actual decision. But in terms of the criteria, it's intellectual rigorousness, covering the issues, clarity of the way they're expressed, and as I say, a degree of originality if that's possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. I've got a question from Octavio now, which says, I'm considering institutional grants, for example, government. Could this be a problem if my proposal is published in another country?
I'm not totally sure what the question's referring to. Just the one thing to make sure of before you submit an entry is we're very clear in the rules that if you do win the prize or come as a runner-up, you do have to accept that it will then be published. I don't think that would be a problem for anyone entering, but just people should be aware that if they do win, we do have the right to publish the entry as well. And though I don't imagine that would be really an obstacle for anybody. So I'm not quite sure how people are funded and what their personal background is not really of any significance in terms of the applications. It's really what's in the entry rather than who you are.
Okay, I've got a question. Thank you for that, Neil. I've got a question from John who says, you mentioned in a previous meeting that papers will be screened from the executive summary alone. That's at the very beginning in the sifting process. But if we're investing time to write a 15,000 word paper, he says, just apologies, let me just make my way back to that question. But if we're investing...
Yeah, I think I got the sense of the question, which is,
okay.
Can people be reassured that we're not just going to have a very quick skim of the executive summary and then throw a perfectly good proposal into the bin, and we certainly won't. There won't be such a large number of people entering this prize that we'll be unable to do that. We will. The executive summary is for us getting a sense of what people's argument is going to be in a nutshell. But we will be reading a very large number of the proposals, particularly ones that have kind of obvious merit or some a serious quality about them. So I hope that can kind of reassure people that we are going to be taking all these entries seriously, and they're not just going to get kind of lost in a vast avalanche of other entries and not read properly. They all will be read properly, and we will be able to, I think, sift out all the ones that have got some quality about them.
And just add to that, because I mean we have had before the panels announced a huge interest, but I think that people shouldn't be put off by the fact that we've had that huge interest, because there's still, as Neil said, it's not going to be so many that are entering that it's going to be impossible to read most of them in some detail. So if you've heard suggestions which is true that several hundred people are interested in, therefore somehow it's too late, well, don't let that put you off. Bung it in, and we will read not only the executive summary but most of the text as well.
Okay, thank you both. I've got a question here asking about approaches to transition. Let me just find that one, which says...
It's asking basically what that means. What in one of the sub questions, if you look at page 4 of the prize pack, is about approaches to transition. What we're really getting at there is there's a question really about whether governments that are going to end up leaving the EU should kind of signal that fact and kind of set out a kind of orderly timetable for doing it. That's one sort of school of thought. And another school of thought argues that there should effectively you have to sort of take people by surprise to prevent things like capital flight. So you want to have a bank holiday and do things relatively quickly so you can get ahead of the markets. So it's really about kind of timing and questions about whether the policymakers should try and take people by surprise or have a more kind of orderly and managed process over a longer period.
But again, I would emphasise on that which either of those you choose, that there is no right answer and to either of those, and the notion that you're going to come up with something that is going to be a clear-cut, simple answer that will have no repercussions, no unanticipated circumstances or fallout, that isn't what the real world is about. So don't feel that you need necessarily go beyond, in my view, discussing the difficulties of these transitions rather than pretending you can come up with one answer.
Okay. We've got a question about someone wanting to submit whose first language is not English and concerned about their grammar and whether that will have an impact.
Okay, so people not being marked here really on their, on the punctuation and the like. I mean, obviously it will help if your pieces are nice and readable and well written, but you're not being marked on grammar here, you're being marked on content and the quality of the ideas. So don't worry if there are small kind of mistakes in your grammar because English isn't your first language.
Okay, thank you for that. We actually have a question about tax, which I didn't expect today, but we've been asked, given the tax implications for the winner, would it be possible to award the prize after the 6th of April?
There are no tax implications.
We have good news on that, don't we?
There are no tax implications. It's a prize, so it isn't taxed.
Well, that is very good news for the winner, then, isn't it? It really is £250,000 prize. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions out there. It's more than halfway through, so if anyone else has questions, if you could let us know, we'll do our very best to answer them. Would anyone care to join my amateur team, asks Jan or Jan. I'll leave that to the other participants. I don't think that's a question for us. And we'll just see if we have any other questions coming through. I'm afraid we don't have VoIP for participants, so you will have to email in, Ajit. Does the non-taxability apply to US residents, asks someone.
Not sure.
I don't know about that. No, it's certainly for UK residents. You might have to ask your tax accountant what the implications are if you're not a resident in the UK. Right, let me get back to the public chat room and see what else We had, will a submission longer than 25,000 words be rejected? Yes, I think 25,000 words
that is an upper limit.
Is the upper limit.
Please do try and keep your entries to less than 25,000.
Great. I think that's actually the first person I've had ever ask about going over. Most of our questions have been about shorter entries, but a very clear answer for Patrick. Need to do some editing and get your submission in below 25,000 words. John Smith asks, will entries be blind marked? I think we touched on that earlier.
We already covered that. The short list of entries will be given to the judges in such a format that they will be blind marked, so the judges will not know who you are or where you're from when they make their decision about who wins.
Okay, let me just check and see if we have any more question comes through. We have the adjunct has now sent in the question, so I'm just going to try to find that. Bear with me. It's a bit of a long one here, so this may take a little time. I'm working using a financial methodology to bring investment into the country, and may I ask, with all my experience with government and large organizations, what is the defined output of the competition? How will my teamwork actually be used to change the economy? Well, I think we touched on that earlier.
Yeah, we already touched on that, and the winning entry and also any runners-up that are awarded, those entries will be published and they will be sent in hard-copy form to key decision makers in Brussels, around Europe, in London. So they will be going very widely and they'll be published on the net for lots of people to see. And I think also they will probably get a lot of publicity because this is a very substantial prize. So your entries will be shaping the public agenda. They will be well publicised. And if you've got good ideas, then yeah, they genuinely could actually help to manage a very difficult situation.
Yes, and one thing we'll be doing is doing a media tour of the eventual winner. So there'll be a chance for a great deal of publicity. We've had a huge amount of interest from the media, not just here in the UK, in Europe, but in Canada, in America, in India, as far away as New Zealand, Australia, and even Fiji. So a huge amount of interest from around the world, not just in the Eurozone. So I think there will be considerable interest in the winner and in the winning entry, and a great opportunity to get your ideas out there that can, as Neil said, potentially make a big difference to how things transpire in the Eurozone. I noticed we have a few logistical questions, which I think we can clear up fairly easily. One was asked if an academic style what was preferred. I think we're really more interested in the content. We're not particularly prescriptive about the style in which it's written, as long as it's clear and coherent, as Derek said earlier. So I hope that reassures you that your submission will be very welcome. And then John asks, may I publish my essay or parts of it before the prize is decided? Do you have a view, Neil?
That's up to you. If you want to publish parts of your entry before entering the prize, that's fine. It won't disqualify you. But we are looking for original work that addresses the questions within the prize. I suspect that if people have written pieces before, they won't really get very far by just submitting pieces that don't really address the questions. But no, if in the process of really addressing the questions in this prize, you publish parts of your work along the way, that's fine.
Okay, John Smith asks about an award ceremony. Yes, we haven't confirmed precisely the arrangements for March when the prize is scheduled to be announced, but there is likely to be media, as I've said, and there will most likely be a press conference / award ceremony of some kind. So we will obviously be in touch with the shortlist when they're decided, and then of course with the eventual winner with any arrangements. But yes, do look out for the announcement toward the end of March. Let's just get back to the questions then and see what else has come in. I know that quite a few people are in the webinar now. Patrick asks, my essay is around 30,000 words, including footnotes. Footnotes are outside, so if you want to do a word count, Patrick, minus your footnotes, hopefully you're under 25,000. Otherwise, you'll have to do a bit more editing. Right, let's move on. Let's see what other questions we have. William, I believe, has sent in a question. Let me just see. Do you attach importance or give special credit to the use of one or several economic models? Derek, you can review on that.
No, we don't.
Very simple, straightforward answer. Excellent. Neil, anything to add?
If the question means, is it useful to do some economic modelling work, I'm sure it might well be useful to do that. If the question is, do we have any kind of preferred economic model, then no. The answer is no model is preferred over another.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris asks...
One of the, if I may just touch on that more soon, one of the problems about all of these economic models is that they really pay very little attention to finance and banking services. So to the extent that this is, at least to some extent, such a crisis, then I think that it will be obviously up to you, but the models seem to be of limited interest.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from John Smith, who says, what happens if a country defaults before the prize is awarded, which is a possibility?
Yeah, asked that before. The intention is still to award the prize.
Yes.
And in fact, if that has happened, these questions will just become even more urgent. In fairness, there is not too long to go now before the deadline anyway. But if something like that has happened, then the questions will just become much more relevant, and there's no chance that will just be the end of the story. So yes, the prize will carry on. Okay, thank you for that. So still incredibly important for people to put their minds to the question and get their entries in. Let me just see. Octavio asks a question about fees, about expenses. I'm not sure that's something that an applicant needs to worry about. I'm sure if the winner was overseas and needed to be, come to London, that's something that could be addressed. So I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point. He does also respond about whether he's allowed to put a logo into his entry, and I think the answer to that is yes, that's fine. Okay, fine. So people can put them in whatever format they want. Let me see what else we have coming in. Will the judges... Okay, let me just see what else has come in here. Ask that question. I think I'm going to go back to the bottom. I think there was a new question in. Had someone from Kazakhstan joining us today, which is great. It's really has attracted worldwide interest. Let me just see if we've got in any more questions. It's now 3:45, so we are coming toward the end of our webinar today, but there still is time if people do want to get in with their questions. So let me just see. We've answered John Smith's questions. All exit mechanisms are political. John Smith asked a good question. Do the judges get to see applications that are not shortlisted by Policy Exchange? Yes, the judges, Derek has access to every single entry and look through all of them. So yes, is the answer to your question. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Let's see here. If we've got any more questions, we'll just hang on for another minute or two, see if anybody has any final questions to ask. And if not, we will close the webinar and we will put the recording of today's webinar up on the Policy Exchange website. So if any of you want to go back and review any of the answers to any of the questions, you may do so, or if you want to send a link to any of your colleagues or friends who are interested in applying for the prize, they'll be able to go in and watch the recording at their convenience. Let me just see if there's any other questions out there. A few thank yous coming in, that's great. Let me just see if there's any final questions. We're obviously going to do our best, as Neil said earlier, to publicize the winner both in the media and to publish the winning entry itself. So the winning ideas will get a huge amount of coverage and prominence. We have someone asking in reference to a media report that 200 applicants have registered and wants to know about that. I think quite a few people have registered an interest, but that's a separate question to how many people have entered, isn't it? Yeah. There is also a question, somebody was just asking about, Mohammed Rabi asked a question, would you be interested in big ideas that try to deal with the economic and financial challenges of our times, Well, this is a prize about a specific question, which is in the prize pack, which is about member states leaving the euro. So it's got to be about that to enter. It's not just a general thing on global economic governance. So no, it's got to be about the question in the actual pack.
Yes, I think that's an important point. This is about the Eurozone, and that needs to be addressed. We've got a question from someone who's, again, about the award ceremony, saying they're going on holiday for 3 weeks in March. When will you notify the winner? The winner will be notified in mid-March. And if you are the winner, then you will need to be available at the award ceremony, and you will need to be available to do media. So hopefully, if you are the winner, Nigel, you'll be able to rearrange your holiday.
If you've got your contact details on there, we'll certainly get in touch with you. So if you're on holiday, do check your email.
And if you win, you'll be able to afford another holiday anyway, so don't worry about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully, have travel insurance. Okay, let me just check one last time to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any questions coming through, but I will just wait 1 more minute in case anyone has any final questions. If not, like I said, we will post this recording on the Policy Exchange website. Can submissions be joint? David, you must have joined us late. We did talk about teams quite a bit earlier on in the webinar. Yes, very much welcome teams. It's not necessary, but it is very much allowed. Let me see. We just need a lead author, as Derek has rightly said, which is the contact, but you're more than welcome to do it on behalf of a group or an institution. That's absolutely fair enough. Let me just double check and see if there's any further questions coming in. Just going to take one final look. I'm afraid I can't see any other questions. But if you do have any questions that didn't get covered, please do feel free to email wolfsonprize@policyexchange.org.uk, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But I think that is, I think that's everything for today. So I just want to thank everyone out there who's been listening and who's been sending in their questions. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and we look forward to receiving your submission. Thank you. Bye-bye.